Welcome back to ABC of Storytelling 2.0, where I share tips, tricks, techniques and secrets that help you tell better stories every single day. Each of these tips are very easy to understand and even easier to follow, and I bring a lot of examples from my work to help you harness the power of stories and storytelling. My name is Rituparna Ghosh and I'm a storyteller, trainer, consultant and coach, and I'm on a mission to help more and more people understand the art and science of storytelling so that they can use it more strategically in their life, in their business, in their work. This week we are on the letter Q and I have 3 of them for you, so let's get started. Now this is a question that I'm asked often. How many stories should I tell? Or how many stories should I have in my story bag? Well, to answer that, let me ask you a question. How many stories are important to create your brand? Or to tell people who you are and what you do and why you're doing what you're doing? How many stories are important to create faith and trust and connections and conversations and action? Well, the simple answer is that there is no answer. There is no real number that I can quantify and say that yes, you can do everything that you want to do in just a set of 5 stories. I'll never say that. But I can help you sort of understand the metrics to find that quantum of stories that you need to tell. Well, the number of stories depend on what are your objectives. Or the objectives that you want to meet while telling stories. Now let's suppose you're a not-for-profit, and as a not-for-profit you want to use stories for fundraising, for program facilitation, for marketing, for awareness, for education, for really documenting your program. If you have to do all of this with a set of stories, you can decide how many stories do you need to tell and how often. Yeah. Now, if you want to use stories to sell your brand or to sell a product or your service, then you can use stories to create that brand building, to talk about your products and services and how it solves problems in your customers, the customer journey that you're trying to create, or how the product has really changed your customer's life. Now, if you were to look at these set of stories, then you need to decide how many of these stories will you tell and how often will you tell them. In a business or in life or even as a leader or a manager, if you're trying to use stories, remember that you cannot use the same set of stories. Yes, you can. Perhaps in the next video I'm going to talk about how to retrieve, how to recycle, how to retell a story, repurpose a story for another objective, for another purpose. But before that, it's always important to keep it like a steady stream of stories coming to you. Now, I don't want to overwhelm you at this point of time and make it feel like storytelling is a trap, that once you get in it, you have to either meet the target, you have to meet a goal, and then that's it, and then you can stop telling stories. Well, it does not happen like that. If you are trying to use stories and storytelling more strategically as a tool to achieve a lot of business or professional objectives, then the idea is to keep enough stories in your bag so that you can use them at the right time and at the right for the right purpose. Now, in that metric, finding that exact number of stories is going to be very difficult. I'm not going to suggest that to you. But the end objective is that you should never run out of stories. If you need it, you already have that. You choose from a bouquet of stories that you gathered over a period of time, or at least you know where the next story is going to come from. And you're not in a position where you have those simple 5 stories and you're repeating and going over and over with those 5 stories. So then you can imagine that your listener or your audience, they know, they see through the farce and they see through that you really don't have anything else to share. You're only repurposing and telling that same story over and over again. That gets a little stale. So the objective is, yes, I don't have an answer. How many stories do you need? You are the right one to judge and to identify the number of stories that you have to tell to achieve your goal and objective. Now, while I will tell you to keep your stories in stock or keep your story bag well stocked, I'm also someone who will ask you to monitor the quality of the stories. Don't fill up your stories with junk, or don't fill up your stories with stories that, these are the easiest stories to tell, or these are the most comfortable stories to tell. And that's a trap, really. Some stories are easy to tell because you have gathered them and you've told them several times and they've always worked. You don't have to work too hard to remember the details or how that story will really impact your listener. Then there are also those stories which are complicated because of a lot of details in the story, a lot of elements that you need to put together in a particular sequence for your listener to really connect with that. Sometimes the story or the format in which you tell it is more cumbersome. Say, for example, you are telling it in a video or in a live talk or a speech, or if you were to put it down in words as a blog, create a photo essay, create a certain digital asset like a carousel or an infographic. So the format may make it more difficult for you to tell it. Now, if you were to retell a story in multiple formats, then it may get really cumbersome for you, or it may be of a kind that you perhaps lose interest in why are you telling it and for what purpose. I'm somebody who will say, let's not do wasteful storytelling, let's not do wasteful communication, because every single piece of story that you tell costs you a lot of time, your effort, your attention, your mind space, maybe resources, and all of it is valuable every time you put it together to take out a story. It also costs your listener their attention, their time, their interest, and their patience for having to read through your story or sit and listen to you or listen to the entire story. So don't waste it on something which your listener is not interested, and it will not really create the kind of impact that you're trying to create for it. So spend your resources well, pay attention to the quality. If you have to tell only one story in a day, do it well, and don't tell it just for the sake of telling a story. So I'm going to hold you back and say that please monitor the quality of your stories, see that they meet the objective that you want them to meet, and always spend your resources where it is due, and don't do wasteful storytelling. One of the greatest functions of a story is that it induces critical thinking and problem-solving skills in the listener. So while you are telling a story, remember your listener, your audience, is quickly analyzing the facts, raising questions, trying to dissect the meaning of your story, and is putting together some understanding of what the relevance of that story is. Now, it's quite likely that the listener, the audience, may land up with a question, like a question which is triggered by your story. So let me give an example. For example, if you are talking about how your product and service has really solved a particular customer problem, then the natural thing that you want is that that story should trigger a question from your audience. Can you help them? Can your product, can your service really solve their problem? And I've done that. I have told stories of how my intervention of using story strategy has helped an organization onboard their employees. Now, when I tell that story, the question that I've got from another client is that, can you sensitize our people about the need to tell stories, and where and how can they find the opportunities to weave storytelling in their everyday functioning, in their everyday work? Now, while you tell one story, it naturally, you may not really know what your listener, what your customer or your client is really looking for and what's their problem, but the fact that I've used a story to solve another customer's problem helps this customer understand what is the most pressing need and how will a story or a storytelling intervention help them. So you see, a story triggers a question, and a question helps me sell my product or my service. Now, you can also tell a story that naturally ends with a question, which could be that I tell this story and I said, well, a story can solve any problem that there is. Tell me what is yours. Now, when I tell this, when I use this question, automatically my audience, my listener or my potential customer is now thinking whether story design can solve. I've got 5 problems in my organization. How can story design help us meet all of these? So you see, a question is very important while you're crafting a story. Keep this question in mind, a question that your listener may naturally ask, or a question that you are going to pose to your audience, to your listener, so that you can take the conversation ahead. That's all we have time for on this week of ABC of Storytelling 2.0. Remember, storytelling is both an art and a science, and you have to balance the two aspects of storytelling, keeping the art and the science of it together so that it gives you or it helps you meet your objective or your goal. So keep it balanced, keep tinkering with these ABCs, keep applying them one by one into every story that you're telling, one tip at a time, and you can always come back to me and tell me whether your stories are working. Now, I'm sure they are working for you, and if they are not, it can only mean that you've not applied them at all. So go ahead and apply these ABCs in the next story that you tell, and come back and tell me whether they are helping you or not. And I would love to listen to your story. Trust me, I'm a better listener than I am a storyteller. So try me on that. If you found this video and this series useful, go ahead and like, subscribe, share it with somebody, because you never know who's looking for some help in the world of storytelling. And for whatever that you do, I hope that you keep telling good stories. Until the next letter, happy storytelling.